The next part of this TPD Round Table discussion focuses around a single word, and that word is permanent, or permanency, as it obviously relates to total and permanent disability. Most TPD claims can easily identify what's permanent and what isn't, but unfortunately there's a growing number of claims where the assessment of permanency is a big challenge. In fact, it's a minefield where subjectivity, unfortunately, has to come into play. So sit back and listen to this exchange between your peers, which I hope will give you plenty of food for thought.
Second sort of general topic of conversation, which revolves around permanency. As mentioned a little earlier, permanency in relation to medical advancements and also in relation to the nature of the type of claims that are being made these days. So I have, again, referring to Kresh, a comment from Kresh Wright in our interview with her a few months ago. This idea of permanent and permanence doesn't exist in the same way as it did many years ago when TPD was first designed, and that's kind of like a bleeding obvious summary about what we've already been talking about. But perhaps Carly, again, if I can start off with you, if you want to expand a little bit on that in relation to the broader issue of permanency when it comes to TPD claims.
Sure, yeah. So I mean, when we talk about the assessment of permanency at claim time, we need to go through having a process of looking at all the objective evidence that is available to us. So if you think about a physical or a musculoskeletal condition, we might have an X-ray, an ultrasound, an MRI, something that shows us that damage, and we can get from that medical professional that damage is permanent. If we're looking at something that's more subjective, so something like a chronic fatigue syndrome, a mental health condition, there isn't an X-ray of the brain to tell us that person's mental health condition is there for a fact. And we don't have any tools to then be able to say, well, what is the impact of that condition on somebody's function, and is that impact permanent? And we know most mental health conditions, barring the very severe ones that would probably have been excluded, are episodic in nature, which means somebody can have something happen to them 5 years ago and go like a marriage breakup, and they can be depressed for a little while. They get their life back on track and they have a great period of function, and they're going, well, they might flip back into that depressive state should something happen to them and they don't have the resilience to go forward. So the fact that they've had something in the past and they were unable to function then doesn't mean that they won't be able to function ever again in the future. And I think that's what we question with subjective tools, that we can't actually say just because they're not functioning now doesn't mean that they will ever function again.
It sounds like a minefield, to be honest with you, with everyone with the greatest of intent to pay a claim when a claim is merited. Mm-hmm. The actual ability to do that seems clouded with advancements in medical technology and in the ability to be objective rather than subjective. Is that about right?
Definitely.
It'd be largely mental health though, wouldn't it? I think the rest, we've had a lot of claims better where stroke, permanent, brain impair, like it's a no-brainer. TPD, the guy's never working again. Mental health, of course, people can be up and down and unable to work for a couple of years and then fine, move on. So I would think with all the medical advancements, there's still a lot of TPD conditions that are very cut and dry. There's pretty simple payouts. I mean, you guys are the experts.
Yeah, I think that's the core of it, that trying to price subjectivity is impossible. You can't price something subjective. Objective, you can. You can. There's stability to it. Mental health has changed in communities and ability of people to talk about it more and all that. That is a subjective thing. And I also think subjectivity, when the insurers get to define what definitions are, is an element of subjectivity too, right? Mm-hmm. It's a definition that some CMO has sat down and written up perhaps, which may not be how the community views the definition of I've had this particular condition. So the minute you're trying to price subjectivity, this is when I think you run into problem. The TPD is the worst of it, I think.
Do you have those conversations with, as part of what you do with your insurance clients?
We do, yeah.
Okay, how does that go down?
Well, you kind of, the industry's caught in this wheelhouse of it's been writing these products for so long, they make money from it, they need to keep up, the expense bases, the volumes, the premiums that come through, and to come along and say, and we might get to that at some point. I'll give you my views, which are probably on the strong side of, should TPD even carry on? I think the minute you're saying to an insurer, hey, just drop all TPD products for now, that's a real problem, and they're in this wheelhouse. There's a great quote we wrote about quite a few years ago, not our quote, that one of the Citigroup CEOs wrote back in the GFC. He had this thing, he said, when the music is playing, you've got to get up and keep dancing. And that explained why they kept writing all those leveraged deals. And so I think the insurance industry here does the same thing. They all feel the minute they step off take TPD out, they won't run any more premiums, advisors won't support them, and the business gets shut down.
All right, well, I'm sure you have an opportunity to expand on that a little later, maybe in closing comments, we'll see how we go. But Hannah, from the underwriting perspective, when we're talking about the issue of permanency, I guess you're on hiding to nothing on the way in, as you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, that's true. But I want to comment just sort of on mental health a little more broadly. I think Sasha's right in terms of people seeking help. Underwriters generally look at a case holistically. So, for example, if someone's had some grief counselling or some marriage counselling in that time and has returned to work, and actually a lot of people are still working throughout that. They haven't even had any time off. They'll often get accepted without a mental health exclusion. We do, unfortunately, we can't sit down and interview somebody. It's on a piece of paper. Resilience can't be measured by an underwriter. But we understand many people are resilient, and despite the fact that they might have had mental health issues in the past, even currently be suffering them, they might not ever lodge a mental health claim. So we do look at them we do look at things really holistically, and we actually try to be as fair as possible. Honestly, again, despite...
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Why has underwriting not moved into working out resilience? Because you can have two people, both end up in a wheelchair, one carries on working, one doesn't, right? So that's got nothing to do with what happened to them. It's about, as you say, the resilience, the response. Why has underwriting not moved away from medical?
How would one measure resilience?
Well, this is the challenge.
Yeah, I think because we can't measure it, and I think, honestly, I would love to sit down and talk to everyone who lodges an application and sort of talk to them about their journey.
How have you responded to these issues in the past when things have gone wrong?
Yeah, that's right. And doctors are busy people. They don't particularly, unless they've seen a specialist, we don't get a lot of specialist information as to how they've handled that. And I think some of the wider criticisms is around slapping on mental health exclusions is how broad the exclusion is. And that is because someone might present with depression or stress. It's often not what they end up being diagnosed with, because symptoms aren't always the end diagnosis. They might have something like bipolar disorder, or that might change along the way, and GPs will often refer them. That GP referral might take, in this current time frame, whether you're going private and it's worse for public, it could take, psychiatrists aren't seeing new patients that regularly. It takes them a long time to get that help. That exacerbates the condition as well. So, I mean, it's hard for us at an underwriting time to sort of assess the permanency. One of the things that came out of, and I'm stepping away from just the issue here, but out of the membership was kind of considering sort of incremental payments. So, for example, mental health, as Carly said, it's quite episodic in nature. So sometimes it's not. It's a total and permanent disability for some. But in terms of being episodic in nature, perhaps incremental support whilst they need it from a TPD, which is final. It's the finality of a lump sum and maybe a large one. That might change the landscape.
That's a different product, though.
That's a different product, correct.
I think the medical profession actually empowers people to take the easy way out at times. Society certainly empowers people with a greater welfare cushion to take the easy way out. And where I think, in the 60s, people would be trying to claim over their own dead body. It would be their last resort. Now a lot of people go, wow.
Okay, so that doesn't make it any easier for life insurance companies to offer a product, say, service.
No, one of the other things to remember is premiums back in those days were much higher than they are today. So you add that to what I'd almost call a race to the gutter by the industry over the last 25 to 30 years.
Just say that again, Guy. Premiums were
Much higher in the old days, across the board.
And cover was much lower.
Yes.
Because of the
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Which is its own
But it was adequately priced for the time. What we've got is industry competition where company A feels that if we're on the same level as everybody else, we're not going to compete, so we're going to undercut them, and then everyone goes, "Oh, bugger, we're going to follow." And over time, you just get this cascading effect where the insurance companies have either cut premiums or increased benefits.
all right, Guy. Well, just move on from there. Turn straight to you, Joanna, to ask you whether you have any response you might want to make to Guy, and or in relation to the nature of permanency, with regard to the comments your fellow panellists have raised.
Yes, thank you. Again, so I think firstly coming back to the basics, what is the role of TPD? Is there actually a need for this product today alongside the income protection and the trauma and the death? And our view is that there is, because these income replacement replaces 70% of income. And there are cut and dry cases, like you were saying, Chris, where it's very obvious that someone can never work again and they need to pay off that mortgage and they need to, feed their families for the rest of
the
their
costs
life.
associated
Yeah, especially
with a long-term TPD customer is enormous.
But it's also difficult to ever, ahead of time, to figure out what those costs are going to be, because I've got a client who needs round-the-clock healthcare, and none of my other clients need that. Well, does that mean we've got to recommend $10 million because this guy's screwed?
Possibly afford it.
Yeah, well, that's the point.
Is it a safety net though, from an advice point of view, or is it you're trying to put someone back in the same position they would have been just before, and that would lead to different outcomes, right?
I think on death you cover debt, so the family members are not impacted. And on TPD, there's things that you self-insure because your rental properties can continue to be rented and things can continue, but you want the specialist care added in or the ability to remodel your home if you need wheelchair ramps and so forth. So you add that stuff in, but your TPD, I never have the same life and TPD benefit. But a lot of people will go 1 million of each.
Death's final. TPD, are they going to live 5 years or 50?
Yeah.
We just don't know. There are so many.
But I'm curious how the advice gets given in a general sense, not from you guys perhaps, but in a general sense. So the original reason of TPD was to replace the lost income when there was an RP, right? Then RP comes along that gives 75%. So now you're actually giving a benefit that replaces the income, sometimes with very high levels of sum assureds, along with the 70% of income. So you sell them sometimes together, I understand.
Well, if you get them together, you could effectively say, well, we're going to cover the 30% gap. Yes, right? And then we're going to cover some lump sum.
Yes.
That's right, you are.
But the challenge then becomes, as I understand that, you're covering the lost income, maybe that's less if you have IP. But you're also thinking about what are the home modification needs? What if it's a very serious thing where the partner needs to take time off work and can't work because they have to take care of the person? So there's potentially very large sums insured, which are sometimes required, but because not all conditions are the same, sometimes those large sums insured are not required. And that's, I think, where we run into the moral hazard and the issue with subjective conditions and subjective claims. Because
you're better off to claim than you are to, you're not.
Potentially today, yes.
Yeah, and I think we touched on the fact that TPD claims aren't as catastrophic as they once were, but I really would like to point out that there hasn't been that many medical advances in neurodegenerative disorders, and they cost a lot of money to get you through the rest of your life. If you're suffering from something like second degree multiple sclerosis or motor neuron disease. So there needs to be that safety net. I also appreciate that trauma will pay out on those. However, trauma is also an expensive product.
We can't insure everything. That's the other thing. One of the questions I lead off every first interview with every new client is, do I have an unlimited budget for you and your family's insurance needs? I politely get a laughter sometimes. Other people tell me what they really think, but no one says yes. Right? So every plan we put together is a compromise. Right? As I say, TPD, are you going to live 5 years, are you going to live 50 years afterwards? Life cover, to your point, there is a line drawn under the claim. We know this guy isn't going to live any longer. We can actually estimate how much is required at that point of time to take care of the needs. We can't do that with TPD. Yeah. So we have these imponderables, and you know, the TPD I sell is based on price around a client's overall budget and affordability, and it's a compromise because we can never give them, the industry won't let us give them enough if they're going to be vegetables for the next 50 years.
No. Part of the challenge with regard to then defining whether a person is totally and permanently disabled rests in that middle word, permanence.
Certainly, and I think that's why a portfolio approach to insurance is so important. We want Australians to have access to total and permanent disability insurance, but we also want them to have access to income protection insurance. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is it's actually paid out more. It pays out the most financial benefits to Australians in 2022, $3.7 billion to 29,000 people. And the leading causes of claim there are accident, cancer, and mental health. Each of those things, as you say, has a better prognosis than people may have had in the 1960s for each of those causes of claim. So there's a story here about the role that income protection needs to play in making sure that people have access to that so that they have the financial support and protection they need to get back on their feet without having to take on that label of totally and permanently disabled if that's not the right thing for them. So there's an income protection story that we need to tell. The other thing about income protection is that it gives people access to rehabilitation services provided by their insurer. And there's really good data about the difference in return to work rates. And, you know, return to work is kind of a misnomer. We talk about people getting their lives back. But there's really good data on people getting their lives back at greater rate when they've had access to really good rehabilitation support from their life insurer. And again, that's something that's available through income protection. So income protection is playing a really important role in supporting people with a more temporary circumstance, as well as giving them access to rehabilitation. Certainly in terms of TPD, of course, you need to meet that total and permanence definition. And, you know, I've heard some of the colleagues in this discussion talking about what that can mean for the person. And it's a really tough thing for the person to not only need to demonstrate, but to wear that label of being totally and permanently disabled and what that can mean for them, particularly in the context of mental health and musculoskeletal challenges. So, you know, I think more can be done to think about the right approach to using TPD the right approach to using TPD and the complementary benefits of income protection.